Inside this box is supposed to be a Nelson New King James Version Classic Verse by Verse Center Column Comfort Print Reference Bible in soft leather look. It's supposed to be brown and thumb indexed. So we will see. Mine came from christianbook.com, and it actually got here quite rapidly. I'm going to try to grab it. One of these tear strips, and here, in fact, is the box. Outer box out of the way, and we'll take a look at the box. And it is a classic verse by verse center column reference Bible. Words of Christ in red. I did buy it even though it was in red because it's not a goatskin Bible, it's brown Leathersoft. And I thought it would be very useful to have as another Longprimer type Bible to use in comparisons. So nothing much written on the sides. And the back talks about all the features. 72,000 references, a concordance, it's a durable Smyth-sewn binding that lays flat. And it has two satin ribbon markers, easy to read 10-point size. And it's verse by verse. So let's open it up and take a quick look before we make our measurements, which we may do at some distant time in the future. Make our measurements and do our real review video. Here it is. Holy Bible in the front. Has edge stitches. It looks like 2 lines of edge stitching. And it looks darker than this in person. On the camera it looks very light brown, but in person it's much darker. Interesting designs on the spine. To say NKJV, and it has the little Nelson house here. And then nothing on the back except the ISBN imprinted and the style 6863 brown. Thumb indexing, gilt but not art gilt edges. There are 2 ribbon markers. One is brown, one is red, it appears. But the reason I really liked this when I saw this in a store is I liked the layout. Oh, the window is closed. You heard a motorcycle ride by on a very cold day in November. It has red headings in the text, red chapter numbers, red numbers for the references, and here's the words of Christ in red. And although I really would prefer black, I think I could actually use that without pain. Well, so that's the introduction to the review video, which at some point I will put together with this unboxing. This week I'd like to review the Nelson New King James Version Classic Verse by Verse Center Column Reference Bible. You've already seen the unboxing, so I'll try to show as little repetitive information as possible. We'll take a quick glance at the box. And features include 72,000 cross-references, a verse-by-verse style. This particular copy you're seeing is in Leathersoft. There's also a goatskin edition. Here is the ISBN. Try to get that without glare and reflection on it. How large is it? It is 9 9/16 inches tall, 6 9/16 inches wide, and 1 7/16 inches thick, measured at the spine. To give you a sense for scale, here is a Holman New King James Version. This is what they call the large print Ultrathin. Height-wise, the two are very similar. The newer Bible is thicker, about the same width. Here we have another Comfort Print Bible from Nelson. This is their large print Thinline, which was released back in 2018. Similar in height. and in width. So this new one is just a thicker book than the earlier one. And then finally I'm going to show you the single column reference Bible, also a Nelson Bible, also released last year. It's a shorter book and a thicker book. This one is in black letter text, and if you've been watching my videos you'll realize that I would have preferred this to have been black letter as well. The layout is 2 columns, verse by verse format. Each column is 53 millimeters wide. There are about, on a closely packed line with lots of letters on it, about 37 characters per line. Top to bottom on a page, there can be as many as 56 lines of text in a column. The page dimensions are 234 millimeters tall, that's 9.2 inches, 157 millimeters wide, that's 6.2. This is roughly the same layout as a Longprimer. Print is generally dark and bold. I think that's a good bold selection there. But sometimes it doesn't appear to be quite as black as that. The margins at the top of the page vary between 15 and 17 millimeters. Remember, they're 25.4 millimeters in an inch. At the bottom it's 10 to 12 millimeters. The inner margin can be as much as 13. It's less than that here. Outer margin is between 13 and 14 millimeters. The font in the text, I measure the capitals, like this L here, this A, to be about 9.5 points when compared to Times New Roman. The lowercase are larger proportionately. They're more like an 11-point lowercase font. It is advertised on the box as 10 points. When you measure the line height, baseline to baseline, you get about 10.5 points. And I think it looks comfortable enough. You don't feel like the lines are squeezing too closely with each other. Verse numbers are at the beginning of the verse, and they're in red. The text is line matched. And we'll just show that if we can. So if you see here, you can see the text from the opposite page right behind the line on the page that's presenting itself. The New King James Version does use italic font for words that the translators include that is not included in the original that they've added for clarity. The New King James Version capitalizes pronouns for deity. And let's see, because he opened your eyes. You know, I don't much like that. I wish they wouldn't have done that, but it's a minor nuisance to me. There are references. It says 72,000 references, plus text and translation notes that are in the center column. Those are in about a 7-point font. The references are in column order. So the references start with the left-hand column, and then there's a break, and then the references go with the right-hand column. So if you want to see your references for the upper right-hand portion of the page, you have to go down to the center of the page. I prefer them where they track down the page so that the references for the top right-hand column are actually close to that point in the center column. They are tagged so you can read them backwards from the center column back to the text because they tell you precisely where they're coming from. They give you a chapter and verse reference. The paper is 37.3 micrometers thick. I estimate the paperweight to be 34 GSM. The actual paperweight may be 36 GSM. I say that based on what Thomas Nelson states for the premium edition. And if the paper here is the same as in the premium edition, then it is 36. That's only like a 6% error, and all I'm doing is estimating. There is a light gloss on the surface. I think you can see that. It does shine at different angles. It's not as flat as it could be. It is a very light beige. It's almost white, but it has a light beige tinge, and there is only moderate show-through. As you can see here in this white space on this page, you can see the print from the opposite page, the chapter number there. It is quite acceptable. Nelson has made very strong improvements in the quality of its Bibles in recent years, so this criticism should be taken in that context. I think they've done wonderful jobs. I like this Comfort Print. I like what they've done in terms of giving us red letters that are generally dark and bold. There is a print non-uniformity issue here, as you can tell, in the red and the black. It's not that bad, but here the red is much darker on the right than on the left. But in the overall context of production processes improvement over the years, it's actually not that bad. Here is a what you might call a New King James Version cameo from the 1980s, a smaller print NKJV Bible from Nelson. And look at that. Look at the variation in darkness in the red that you had in those days. It's really very striking. This is quite faded up here, and you don't see anything like that in this newer Bible. There are brief book introductions here. They're in about a 9-point font. There's the introduction for Genesis. It gives you a sense for what you find. The book titles are at the outside top of the page. Get to where we can see one. There it is. So you get both the book title and the contents here at the outside top. Page contents there. So 224 is the first verse on the left. 420 is the last verse on the right page. Page numbers are in center top. That's okay, and that probably is a good use of the space, since you've already used space up here for the book title and the contents. Putting the book, the page number at the bottom is acceptable too. Having this here really helps you quite a lot to navigate the Bible rapidly if you want to move from one book to another. The headings are in the text. As you see here, they're in about the same size font as the Bible text itself. They're in a red italic, approximately 9.5 point font. Chapter numbers are large and bold at the beginning of the chapter. Books of the Bible do begin on a separate page. So here's 2 John, here's Jude, these small books where you would expect perhaps them to begin in the middle of a page. They actually begin on their own separate pages. The words of Christ, as we noticed, are in red, and they're in red throughout. This red generally is fairly dark. I wish it were darker, but could be much worse, as we've seen looking at that older Bible. Now, in contrast with the large print Thinline reference edition, which I reviewed about a year ago, this edition, this verse-by-verse center column reference, appears to have all the textual notes and translation notes that are available generally in the King James Version. So here, looking at Revelation 22:19, we see a reference, A, and we see two numerals, 1 and 2. If you look down at 22:19 here, you see that the A reference is to Exodus 32:33. Then at God, where it says, God shall take away, here in this Textus Receptus based Bible, it tells you that the majority text, that's the Hodges and Farstad majority text, reads, may God take away. And then this note tells you that rather than Book of Life, which is the Textus Receptus reading, that the Nestle Allan and the majority text both read Tree of Life. So almost all the manuscripts and the oldest manuscripts read tree, not book. I'm pleased that this edition has all of those notes. There's a concordance. The concordance is 165 pages long. It's in 3 columns. The font is somewhere between 7 and 7.5 points. The words that are indicated are in all caps. Then that word appears here in a context line, just as the initial letter. And it is in a column format rather than, so it's listed rather than jumbled together in a paragraph as you often see in older King James Bibles. After this lengthy concordance, come to a pair of blank pages. On the back side of the second blank page is a note on the type. It's from 2K Denmark, designed by Klaus Kroh and Heidi Rand Sorensen. So I'll let you read that if you like. And then there are 7 maps spanning 8 pages. They are fairly colorful, subdued colors, not garish or bright. They are on a semi-glossy paper. They do not go into the gutter. I'll show you the one map that spans 2 pages. You see how they've designed it so that you don't lose locations in the gutter. But it is fairly low detail. There's not a lot of information there on the maps. Some people don't like this glossy coating to maps because it makes it difficult to write on them. The ink will tend to smear. There is no map index, so there's the last map. Then you have 1 sheet of cardstock. You have a paper liner, so it's a paste-down construction with a paper liner. It is a sewn binding. If we go to Genesis 21 and 22 and look in the gutter, you should be able to see the threads there. Perhaps you can. I can't see them on my little screen here, but I'm hoping that you can see them. So there's one, for instance, right there, fingertip. So definitely a sewn binding. The Leathersoft cover, this is an imitation leather. It's very flexible, and it has 2 lines of stitching around the edge, so there is boundary stitching here. It will lie open in Genesis, but it tends to do so only at an angle. So if I could get somewhere close to the beginning of Genesis, I can coax it to lie open. Its natural tendency is to flap closed, but it can be coaxed open. It just does that at an angle rather than being flat. The text does fall away into the gutter due to this narrow inner margin, but often it's not an issue because there's poetic text here that's formatted this way with a larger inner margin. But here, the way it curves down into the gutter on both sides, you may need to do some manipulation if you have a strong magnification to your bifocals or trifocals or progressive lenses. Now if we go to the front of the Bible, we'll see that there's a presentation page on the paper liner. There's only that 1 page of cardstock. Then you have the half leaf, the title page, and then the back side of the title page. There is the copyright page. Gives you the title of the book. Thomas Nelson is a division of HarperCollins. Copyright 1982. This is the 84 text, not the 82 text. Gives you the Library of Congress number. What to do when quoting it. It is printed in the People's Democratic Republic of China. And this is the first printing in 2019. After the copyright page, there's the table of contents, a preface, books of the Old Testament, books of the New Testament, and a concordance. There are no deuterocanonical books. This is a typical modern Protestant Bible, which breaks with the ancient tradition of including the deuterocanonical books in Bibles. That change was made in about 1820. Since then, our Protestant Bibles have been deprived of the deuterocanonical books, which used to be printed in the separate section. The preface to the King James Version, it tells you what it means by NU text and M text. Some people don't like the textual notes in their Bibles. I like them quite a lot. Have an attractive opening page to the Old Testament, and here you are in Genesis. You have the introduction, and you have the text. And let me see if I can show you the shine there. See that gleam across the paper? There are brown head and tail bands, which you should be able to see here. Hopefully that's in focus. And the ribbon markers are shiny on both sides. I think they call that double satin. And they seem to have been cut nicely at the edges, so there are no extra threads sticking out. They are 10 millimeters wide, which is a good width, 360 millimeters long, so they have enough length to extend nicely at the corners of the Bible. So you can use them at the corners without any issue. They are put in a crooked way. Maybe I can show you that as well. So this red one, for instance, wants to extend at that angle rather than square on. Parallel with the spine, it wants to come out at something like a 20-degree angle. Now we'll take a close-up look at the font. We're looking in Revelation 5. Line spacing, I think, is adequate. It looks, in terms of tracking, to be quite attractive. The letters are not too close to each other, nor are the words too closely packed into a line. And it's an attractive, bold print. The strokes and the letters are fairly thick. One of my problems with the Schuyler Canterbury, for instance, is that the font is just too narrow. Strokes are too thin. Now here is the same font as it appears in the Nelson single column, printed in 2018. That's on the right. So you have a little more line spacing, I think, on the right, but you have the single column single column paragraph type formatting. Now on the right is the same font as it appears in the Nelson large print Thinline. It does appear more bold on the left, doesn't it, than on the right? A bit more attractive on the left, at least in my opinion, than it is on the right. The book on the right has a major flaw in that it does not include all the textual translation notes that the one on the left does. In my opinion, the new font really shines in comparison with this font in the older Holman, which also appears in certain Nelson editions, I think, as well. Notice how closely those lines are spaced. That really is, to me, that's very annoying, and it makes it difficult to read. This is just much more attractive here on the left. With the larger characters, the better line spacing. The characters are printed a bit more boldly on the left. You just have less of a feeling of claustrophobia over here than you do over here. So I'm very pleased with this on the left. I just wish it were available in a black ink version without the red letters, black ink throughout, and with perhaps paper that's less shiny than this is. Now finally I'm bringing in this old New King James Version verse-by-verse Bible with the 1982, the original text on the right. And actually I think, although it's a smaller font on the right, it's more attractive than the one on the left. I think it would be a good idea for Nelson to publish this again, perhaps in the Comfort Print font. This would be your NKJV Longprimer on the left and your NKJV Cameo on the right, which would be a very nice combination. The one on the right certainly is much more portable. I called this a Longprimer when we were doing the font comparisons, and Longprimer simply means it has a 10-point font. But to show you that it's similar to the Allan Longprimer, compare the two here. This is my 53 brown. It's a goatskin Bible versus a Leathersoft Bible below. But very similar. Page size is a bit smaller here in the Allan than this, but quite comparable Bibles. We haven't looked at the spine yet, so I want to show you the spine decorations here. So you can see that they've indented the Leathersoft in various places to give you the illusion of a raised hub. So how do you know whether your NKJV Bible is the 82 or the 84? Well, you can tell that it's the 84 if it says in 1 Peter 3:20, if it says, "When once the divine long-suffering waited." The original, the earlier 82 edition has the long-suffering of God rather than the divine long-suffering. Now let's take a brief look at some of the references in the various Nelson Comfort Print editions. And we'll do that by just looking here at Colossians 1:3, where our new verse-by-verse reference has 3 references: 1 Corinthians 1:4, Ephesians 1:16, and Philippians 1:3. If we look at the single column reference Bible, the same spot, we'll see the same 3 verses are referenced for Colossians 1:3. But if we look at the large print Thinline references for it, for 1:3, you see that there is just one Philippians 1:3. So it omits the Ephesians 1:16 and Philippians and 1 Corinthians 1:4 references. The large print Thinline just simply has fewer references than either the single column reference or this newer verse by verse. It's also a good idea to check your New King James Version to see if they're giving you all the textual and translation notes. And what I like to do is I like to check Colossians 2:8, where there is typically a note here at the word cheat. I think this is a less than optimal translation in the New King James Version. The literal reading instead of cheat is plunder you or take you captive. So you need to see a note here at 2:8 to know that you have all of the textual and translation notes. If you look at the single column reference in the Comfort Print at 2:8, you see beware lest anyone cheat you, and then there's a note there. And if you go over to 2:8 in the column, you see again the note, plunder you or take you captive. But if you take out your large print Thinline reference edition and you go to 2:8, you see that there is no footnote there at cheat, and so you do not get that additional information that you would get in either this classic verse-by-verse reference Bible or in the single column. finally we'll sum up, and I just wanted to show you that my copy here is thumb indexed, and the thumb indices seem to have been inserted well. Don't seem to be any problems there. They're not likely to fall out anytime soon. Well, I like what Nelson has done here. I think this is a very good production. Quality is very good. I like the print a lot. I like the opacity of the paper. But I think those of you who've been watching this channel for some time will know what I'm going to say negative about it. I want to just note that my criticism is intended to be feedback to the publisher to let them know what I think at least they can do better. They know their market better than I do, so they must have printed this only in red letter for a reason. Perhaps sales on this black letter single column reference weren't as good as they like, and they've determined that the New King James Version readership simply is a red letter Bible readership. But for whatever the reason, they've decided to go with red letters here. I would have preferred this to have black ink simply for readability. It's simply much easier to read that way. The paper, as you can see, does have a shine to it. There are papers that Oxford uses that are very matte that would have been preferable to this. But altogether, even those negatives said, I think this is a very good edition. It's very readable. This Leathersoft is quite flexible. It's easily bent. Feels very comfortable in your hands. And overall, I like this Bible very much. I won't be using it as much as I use the single column reference Bible because this has very nice print and paper as well, and it has black letter text without. I prefer the verse by verse format here, but I'll be using this more because of the black letter text. This Bible is very much superior to the older Holman large print Ultrathin, which I have yet to review. But although it says it has easy to read type, that's the greatest problem with it. That and the fact that its words of Christ are in red as well. The letters are just too crabbed. The line spacing is too narrow. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Nelson Center Column Reference Bible in the verse-by-verse format. If you did, remember to like the video and subscribe if you're so inclined. Thank you very much for watching.